Republicans are facing a growing divide over the abortion issue. Heading towards the 2024 campaign, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace taking aim at Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' recent signing of a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. Mace calling on Republicans to find middle ground on the issue, saying, quote, signing a 6-week ban that puts women who are victims of rape and girls who are victims of incest in a hard spot is not the way to change hearts and minds, end quote. Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill, joining me right now. One thing that you're taught never to talk about is abortion, politics, or religion, because you're not going to change people's minds. But obviously, people are talking more and more about it since the Roe v. Wade decision last year. But when concerns come out about this issue, Niall, it's often brought up that women need to be protected who are the victims of rape and incest. But aren't they the exception to this ban, as they are in most other states?
They are the exception, but there's a very important caveat to that, Adrienne. The Florida ban is at 6 weeks, and women who are victims of rape or incest can get abortions up to 15 weeks of pregnancy if they provide documentation. And that stipulation is very controversial by its nature, because clearly you're going to have women who have gone through some of the most horrific experiences that a human being can go through and are going to be asked, you know, is your paperwork in order? And I think people can see the political and issues with that and the lack of compassion that Nancy Mace is referring to.
Well, and I think that for a lot of people, they would agree with that wholeheartedly, because, you know, anytime you go in for any type of medical procedure, you don't really want to be asked, where's your paperwork? You just want to get help. On the other hand, though, don't you think that most Republicans, those who don't agree with Nancy Mace, would say that is far and above a very small minority of abortions provided in this country? Most people are not getting abortions because they were raped or because they're the victims of incest.
Well, I'm sure they would, Adrienne, and I think one of the reasons that we as a nation haven't really come to a consensus on abortion is because there is a fundamental schism in one's view of it. And there are a significant number of Americans who believe that it is the taking of human life and so can basically never be justified, except perhaps to save the life of the mother. So there are people predominantly in the Republican Party who take that view and who favour very strict restrictions. That's a valid point of view, but it's a minority point of view when you look at the opinion of the general public.
Yeah, Nancy Mace's comments are certainly minority. Her comments coming the same day that Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel says the GOP wasn't aggressive enough, wasn't assertive enough when getting their anti-abortion views across during last year's midterm. So I want to read what she said. She said, quote, the guidance we're going to give to our candidates is you have to address this head on. Many of our candidates across the board refused to talk about it, end quote. I mean, why are people still so afraid of talking about this it's a very divisive issue, no doubt. I mentioned that at the top of our chat here. But why is the Republican Party, who is well known for where their stance is, mincing words?
Because I think they're worried about the political implications of being direct about it. You mentioned the Florida ban. 75% of people in a poll were opposed to that 6-week ban, including 61% of Republican voters. So I think there is this fear. Republicans in the midterms certainly would have preferred to fight that election on economic issues or crime or immigration. They don't see abortion, frankly, as a good political issue for them. And I know it can seem weird to break it down in that way. So I think they're trying to find a more politically conducive way of representing their views rather than, to your point, just going silent about it.
Okay, so real quick, just kind of simple answer here. Is this a separation moment, a crossroads for the Republican Party? Is this a separating of the wheat from the tares, so to speak?
I think it's a separation moment that has been forced on the party, and I don't think the terms of that separation are going to be finalised for quite a while.
All right. Niall Stanage, thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.